On this episode of Scammer Stories, the number one question I get in my email inbox and through social media comes from adult children desperately trying to save a parent who's trapped in a romance scam. They've tried everything: begging, interventions, cutting off money, even taking control through power of attorney, and still nothing seems to work. Over the years, I've heard countless theories. Do you hit them with tough love, or do you back off? Is there actually a right way to help someone who's emotionally attached to a scammer? The woman in this episode has a very different perspective because she tried one approach, and when it failed, she tried the exact opposite. Jennifer Wallis is a financial advisor who now speaks publicly about romance scams after watching her own mother become a victim. In this episode, she shares the mistakes she made, the lessons she learned, and why changing the way she communicated may have helped save her relationship with her mother. Here's her story.
So I grew up in Oklahoma City in, I'd say, like a middle-class home. My parents were married for over 50 years. I have an older brother, but I would definitely say I come from humble beginnings. My dad was a carpenter, and my mom stayed at home part of the time, and then she worked in an office later in life.
Did they get a divorce, or did he pass, or what happened there?
No, my dad had an aortic dissection in 2005 and nearly died. And so he didn't, but they were able to save him, but he was disabled after that. So he was sick for about 13 years and my mom became his caregiver. So I do know being a caregiver is extremely hard. And I'm sure it was extremely lonely during that time, but he passed in 2018.
Being a caregiver is hard on so many levels. It's exhausting, it's isolating, and one of the things people don't talk about enough is the loneliness, that deep loss of connection, the quiet moments where you realize you don't have someone to talk to the way you used to. So it makes sense that the idea of finding a new companion starts to creep in, making you a perfect target for scammers.
It started with like nonprofits calling, quote unquote, nonprofits calling and asking for donations. And so they would, make up names. I actually worked for a nonprofit for 15 years. And so I started to pay a little more attention, like, now who's calling you and asking you for donations? And it was like NADA, National Troopers Association or something. And that's not really the name. So I started looking at some of the names of these companies that she was donating to. And I honestly think like the same people just changed the name of the company they were calling about. And so it started with donations. Those weren't huge red flags at the time. I was just kind of like, go to this website. Here's how you can check out to see if a nonprofit's real. And just was trying to help her be a little more alert. I didn't realize where this was going to lead.
The same scammers there become romantic, or did she go on a site somewhere?
The next thing that happened was she hired this company that called and claimed to be like a tech support company. And for X number of dollars, they would take care of her computer. And what they ended up doing is she let them log on to it and they planted ransomware that went off after like several months or something. And so that was kind of the first time where I knew like she had fallen for something. And so that was still like when my dad was alive. And then after he passed away, it was probably a year or two after that, she told me that she had met someone on Facebook. And I'm actually a financial advisor. And so I teach people about scams and have done financial education for like all of my career. And so I had my red flags going off whenever she said she met someone on Facebook. And the way that it happened is she went in like a fan group for a celebrity. And what I've learned since then is that is like prolific hunting ground for scammers.
Yeah, it's the worst. I commented on one, like a country singer from here in Oklahoma, and immediately I was getting messages from scammers. It was wild how quick it happened.
Yeah, so they lay it out. It's like a mousetrap. So they lay out this trap, a million different celebrities, but like the one in particular that she really fell for was a Kenny Chesney one. I did a class last week about scams. And I scrolled on my phone literally for 5 minutes and never got to the end of all of the fake fan groups that are set up as traps for people that scammers set up as traps. And I wish that they were better regulated, but they just are not.
Okay, so how did you figure out that this was happening?
So she told me she met someone. And at first I was like, okay, well, my parents were married for over 50 years. It'd be weird if I had a stepdad at this age, but I wanted her to be happy, if she really met someone. And so I was just like trying to be supportive. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, tell me about that. How did you meet? I'm thinking like they met at church or a mutual friend or something. And she was like, well, it was through Facebook. And then immediately I'm like, oh no. And so then she tells me that it was in a fan group, and this country singer had started messaging her and asking her which song was her favorite and how long she'd been a fan and if she'd ever seen him in concert and all of these things. And then she found out it was actually him.
Jennifer says if she could go back now, she would have handled her mother's romance scam very differently. She was blunt, matter of fact, focused on facts, proof, and logic. She thought if she could just show her mom the truth, it would snap her out of it.
I did not handle that well at all because I knew it was a scam. So my personality is like type A, take control. Instantly, I just start hitting her like I'm the FBI. Like I just hit her with facts. Like that's such a widespread scam. That's not real. There's Netflix stories about this. There's Dr. Phil episodes about this. Like this happens over and over. This isn't real. This is a trap. And just kind of trying to like probably aggressively point out to her how ludicrous it was. I didn't take into account that might hurt her feelings because I was just mad that scammers were, taking advantage of my mother. And so I've really learned was not the right way to approach it with her.
If you could go back, what would you have done differently in that moment specifically?
I think if I could go back in that moment specifically, I would have approached it with less judgment and not anger at her, but just anger at the fact that she's in this situation and someone's taking advantage of her, because that ended up making her want to be more secretive, or like she started lying to me. And I mean, as far as I know, my mother never lied to me my whole life. And then, she starts trying to sneak around and do things. And so it really just sent us down a path. Instead of her confiding in me and feeling like she could continue to talk about it, it sent us down a path where I was being judgmental about it. And I think that's a really natural way for most people to respond. And I bet a lot of people in my situation probably respond the same way, like, that's ridiculous. But if I could go back in time, I would have been more inquisitive about like, oh, well, tell me more about that. How do you know that that's really him? And have you done a video chat? And what proof has he sent? And, things along those lines. That's what actually ended up opening the line of communication later, is that I changed my approach. And that was the approach that worked. And that was just the beginning of a wild ride of just the same things over and over again.
The celebrity scam started somewhere in 2022.
She would be talking to multiple fake ones at one time. She obviously had to know that at least some of them weren't real. That's where I really got interested in, like, why does this work? Like, why does she want to believe this so much? What's the psychology behind this? And the excitement of, someone like instantly they're in love with you. Like I've done it. I've gone on those fan pages and put myself out as bait, just like you did, to kind of learn, like, how does this work? And without giving them really much information. I mean, of course, I'm lying about my name and, my picture and all of that stuff, but instantly, like within minutes, they're just like, oh my gosh, I have feelings for you. I think I love you. I'm like, I haven't done anything to make you love me. I haven't been especially charming, or we haven't had these deep conversations. So they just start love bombing almost from the beginning. And if you're lonely and you haven't had that in your life, or you hope that you might find love again, that has to be intoxicating.
Do you think her age had anything to do with it?
I do think her age had something to do with it. Much later in life, she was diagnosed with dementia. And I feel like her low scam awareness is something that was probably a tip-off that there might be some cognitive decline happening. But it wasn't just romance scams. Like, low scam awareness is where you just don't have any filter, where you are like, whatever tells you, someone calls you up and says, I need to get on your computer. And she's just like, okay. And I'm like, where is the mother that used to tell me not to talk to strangers and, like,
Exactly.
raise me to be fearful of all of these things where literally just any random person could call up and be like, oh, I need to get on your computer, and she would let them. So she
Yeah.
she didn't have that filter anymore.
Some people have a theory that age and dementia and cognitive decline are part of the reasons, but then younger people are scammed too. So how do you explain that away?
Yeah, I don't think it's exclusive to people who are having cognitive decline. I think really the way that scammers work, they prey on people who are, starved for attention or missing something in their life, even married people. Like I know of situations where someone starts a relationship with someone they think is real and their marriage ends because of this. And it's actually just the scammer the whole time. So to me, that's super sad that I feel like you're vulnerable if you open the door to someone online that you don't know, that you can't vet that they're a real person. I feel like that's playing with fire. And no matter what your age is, you should not even go down that road.
What ended up happening then with your mom and the scam, and how did it progress and
So,
how did it stop and things like that?
yeah, so while the celebrity scamming was going on, there were other scams that she would fall for as well. One of them was the scam that she got from an IT company saying they had charged her card like $399. And, if this isn't you, contact us at this phone number. So she called because she was like, oh no, they charged me $399 and I didn't order this. And then she let them log onto her computer. They said they were going to give her a refund. So they logged onto her computer and had her log into her bank account. And they had moved $10,000 from savings to checking, and they were preparing to move the entire $30,000. And she realized this might be a really bad idea. So she called the bank and was able to stop it. So when she came so close to losing that money, she sort of like snapped out of it and was like, I think I messed up. I could have really messed up. And so I took that opportunity to call her estate planning attorney, and we met with her and we're like, we feel like you need another layer of protection. And, there might be times when someone is trying to scam you or trying to trick you and you may not realize it. So what if we, let me be your trustee? She had a trust, and let me be the trustee. Let me be that layer of protection. And then I would make sure that she always had a bank account with whatever she needed in it. And so she agreed to that. So that made my job much easier. I know that if she wouldn't have agreed to that, I would have had to get her deemed incompetent or something, which I was trying to do everything and maintain a relationship with her. So I did sort of take that opportunity when she had clarity to, get control of the bulk of her money, because I feel like if I hadn't done that, it would be gone.
Taking care of a family member with dementia is hard. But in this case, assisted living was a godsend, not because she planned to, but because it was time.
Right up until the time she moved, she was still talking to a scammer who was not a celebrity, but just like a romance scammer. And he would have her send gift cards. He started saying things like, well, I really want to go to church, but I don't have gas money. And I haven't eaten anything for a few days. Could you send me just like $10 on gift cards?
Seriously? A scammer using church and gas money as their angle? Nothing is off limits. They'll use faith, kindness, and they'll disguise it as something good. That's how they get in.
And so she was still sending a little money here and there, but before I was able to get control of the bulk of her money, she lost over $1,400 in one instance of sending $100 Apple gift cards to one of the scammers. And I also know that she had, after I locked down her money, she had some coins and silver that she started going and selling and sending him that money so I wouldn't know about it.
Yeah, they'll sell everything, their home, their cars.
Yeah, it's so sad to me. And the thing that I've learned, I've listened to, some of your episodes, and I think what you are doing is so important. So thank you for this opportunity to tell our story. But it gets to a point where you're in it, you start to realize, what if this isn't real? But you need it to be real, because then you realize what you've lost if it isn't real. And so for her, it stopped because she moved into assisted living and started getting to the point where she wasn't really tech savvy anymore, couldn't log onto a computer, couldn't use a cell phone the same way that she had. So unfortunately, the dementia is really what stopped it. But there were steps that I could take, while she was still doing it to protect her. Like I put child protection things on her phone where she couldn't take pictures and send him pictures of gift cards, but she would still get them and read off the numbers. But I tried to do some things kind of behind the scenes to protect her because I had to face the fact that I was on her side, but she was on the scammer side. We did not have the common goal of keeping her safe. So I had to almost like work against her behind the scenes in order to protect her, which was really sad.
And then you and I were talking how it was kind of like a full-time job because you followed her, you could follow her banking and everything. And would you get alerts and then have to rush places? And I mean, how did that work?
Yeah. So I learned that once she made me the trustee of her accounts, I could log onto her bank account. And so I went in and set up alerts where if she withdrew or spent more than like $25, it would send me a text to let me know. So at least I knew. And so she knew, I told her, I'm going to know if you spend more than $25 or $50 because she had gone, I don't know what the purpose was, but at one point the scammer had to go to different ATMs to withdraw different amounts of money. So I see on the same day, there's like a withdrawal from this part of town, a withdrawal from this part of town. I'm like, what is this about? And then she would tell me like, oh, well, Kenny needed me to go get some money for, whatever. And so once I put the alert on her bank account, that sort of locked it down a little bit more. And she knew that I was paying attention. And we also got her a caregiver that was helping her like run errands and like take her to doctor's appointments. And so she was working with me instead of working with the scammer to kind of like, oh, you don't need to get cards today. Let's not buy those. And so she started talking her out of that. So I'm super thankful for her help because she was part of protecting her. But the scammers went to great lengths. Like at one point, they told her that the celebrity was going to take her on vacation for $40,000 across Oklahoma. And I'm like, I don't even know what you'd spend $40,000 on to tour Oklahoma. Why would that cost $40,000?
Some Route 66.
You're from Oklahoma, you understand, right? So that's a lot of money to spend in Oklahoma just to travel around. Mm-hmm. So they even sent her, quote unquote, a letter from Sony, his record company, that was like almost like a PTO request where he had asked off and his PTO was approved. And it was the letter that had like Sony logo on it. And it had her name in it, like a contract. I can send it to you. But like a contract that said, he'll pay $25,000. You just have to pay the other $15,000 for this $40,000 vacation that's been approved. We hope you have a great time. And so he was trying to get her to spend $15,000. So she came to me and said, well, he's going to come take me on vacation. Can I have $15,000? And I said, no, you can't. I'm not going to approve that. So she never had access to more than $300 at a time.
What'd she say when you told her no?
She went to the bank and she asked them how much money she had. And thankfully, I'd worked with the bank closely enough that they knew, yeah, she has two accounts in her name. One's in her trust name, one's in her personal name, but she doesn't have access to the one in her trust name. And I don't even want her to know how much money's in it because that's where most of her money was. So she went to the bank and said, hey, do I have access to $15,000? And they said no. And she was like, they started asking questions, thankfully, like, why do you want this money? And she said, well, my boyfriend's going to take me on vacation.
Now let that sink in. This is how powerful these scams are. It's not just about money. It's about belief. Because to the victim, this feels real. The relationship feels real. The future feels real. My mom never showed up for our last Christmas because her scammer said he had a diamond mine in Turkey and he ran into emeralds. I mean, come on. It excited her because she thought she was going to have diamonds and emeralds on every finger.
And they had been trained enough to know that that was a scam. And so they actually ended up closing her account. And they called and told me, hey, we're going to have to close this down because of all the scam activity and the fraud activity. And then they called Adult Protective Services as well and filed a report.
Oh, okay. So the banks are starting to call Adult Protective Services. That's the first time I've heard of that. Huh.
Yeah, that was kind of, first I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to be in trouble with DHS when I've done everything I can to try to protect her? And so I had to have like a call with the agent that was assigned to that. So thankfully, when I talked to him, I was like, yes, I know she's been scammed. Yes, I know. Here are all the steps I've taken. Here's everything I've done to try to protect her. And he ended up like really being super understanding and kind and was just like, well, it sounds like you're doing everything you can. And, we just wanted to make sure that someone knew that, could keep her safe. And I was like, I'm doing everything I can to keep her safe. But the technology, was not helping. It was not my friend back when she could get on Facebook or use her cell phone to text.
And one thing that, you've got to kind of laugh about that we laughed about when we spoke earlier was he had a Nigerian accent, right? Kenny Chesney. And he had a Nigerian accent.
Yeah. So she did talk to him on the phone. And he had a very strong, like, Nigerian accent. And so that was like when I learned kind of how to talk to her. I was like, we saw him in concert. Like, don't you think that's weird that he didn't sound like that? He sounded very country, like he's from Tennessee. Like, don't you think it's weird that he has this accent? She was like, yeah, that is kind of weird. And like one really sticking point for her was that he pronounced her cat's name wrong. Her cat's name was Buddy. And because of his accent, he said, how's Booty doing? Oh. And she thought that was hilarious, but it also really offended her that he couldn't say the cat's name right. And so that's like, she wanted to break up with him after that. And then like another one came along.
Oh, he crossed the line with that one. He did.
The line. He got the cat's name wrong. Totally. Yeah. The Booty. He was asking about the booty, but he meant Buddy, but he didn't know how to say it right. And so that was like one thing that was a deal breaker for her. But you do sort of have to laugh about it at times because it's so ridiculous and just the life that you're living when you're in it and you're trying to protect someone like that. And that's something I think what you're doing is so important is that people just know, like, you're not alone. You're not the only person that's been in this situation. I do believe that people can be convinced, to get out of that situation if they have all their faculties about them. But I think that it has to be done in a very, very specific way where they don't feel shame and they, know that they're a victim.
It's almost like letting it be their idea.
Yeah, that's what I tried to lead her to. Is like, she got concert tickets. And so she still thought she was really talking to him. And I'm like, well, isn't it weird that we're like up here in the 200 section and we didn't get to go backstage and meet him? Like, if you're madly in love and you're going to get married and he's going to take you on this $40,000 vacation, why aren't we hanging out with him right now? Like, don't you think he'd want to see you? And she was like, what? She didn't really have an answer for that. But I could tell like it bothered her that she did agree that if it was real, then he would have done that. But, she still, the fantasy was really strong. Like, it really is like an addiction. She saw a counselor for a while and finally the counselor was like, she has an addiction and she's not willing to get help. So there's not really any more I can do.
Well, and I think you're right. That drive to be right for everyone is so strong. Admitting you're wrong would be hard when everyone's been
because you admit how much money you've lost and how you believe someone. But just because you're an honest person who wants to believe other people are honest too, that makes you a victim. That doesn't make you, that's not something to be ashamed of, but I know it feels shameful. But I hope people can move past that and realize like stopping it as soon as possible is the most important thing. And, obviously if you could give information to get them arrested, but I think in most cases they use like voice over IP and they're overseas and it's hard to track them down. But stopping sending money is the most important thing, even if you have to admit that it wasn't real and that you were tricked.
Yeah, that's why when I talk to victims or survivors, whatever you prefer to call them, I talk to the ones who have ended a scam. And I'm like, what you did most people don't do? That's a win. Mm-hmm. Now you can move on with your life.
Yes. Warn others and, tell people about your story. I think that's really important is that it is so widespread. And I think with AI, it's only going to get worse. They did try at one point. I was very interested to see how it was going to go because I said I would have to meet him on a video call to approve the $15,000, which I was never going to approve. But they tried to do a video call with me and they showed like a video of Kenny Chesney and then they just tried to like talk over it.
Yep.
But I was able to find the interview and like send it to them and be like, you idiot, just aired on, E! Entertainment or whatever on this day. This wasn't even you. It didn't even look real, but that was their attempt to try to fool me to give them the money, which I was never going to do.
So you say that you go around as a financial planner or advisor and talk to people about scams. You said you did last week, right?
Yeah, I just did it last week, and I've done others. I think like as scams come out, our company releases a bulletin that's kind of like, hey, I got this call last week. Here's what happened. Here's how it went. Like just being aware, I think, is one thing. But I think like really having a trusted person that you can talk to, whether it's a friend, a family member, or someone, I think everyone needs to identify someone like that in their life where they're like, I got this call. It sounds crazy. It sounds weird. But do you think this is real? And like, I think the isolation is what really works in the scammer's favor, is like if they have a secret and they're told to keep it a secret, or their family will try to keep them apart or whatever. But really keeping that communication open, I think, is super important, so that if someone is starting to go down that road of being scammed, then they will talk about it and they will say, does this sound weird to you? Like sometimes we need someone else to like examine the evidence that we aren't emotionally invested, that's not emotionally invested like we might be. Scammers are really great at like love bombing you or creating some sense of urgency depending on the scam. Like, you have to do this right now. You can't call anyone. You have to do this. Your brain like switches off the logical part and it goes into like fight or flight mode, and you literally can't think straight. And so they prey on that. And so if we would all just take a breath and be like, okay, this sounds weird. Let me talk to someone else that's not involved and see if this adds up. I think if we all had that person in our lives, scammers would not be nearly as successful.
And when people want me to describe how someone can fall for this, I say the closest thing that I can compare it to is I've made some really stupid decisions in my life when it comes to men and love. So I try and give people a little grace. I mean, I may not have given away my life savings, but I've made some decisions that I look back on and think, who was I? I don't even recognize that person. That was so stupid. How could I have fallen for that? Because my emotions got involved in everything. You just look back and think,
right. Yeah. I mean, we've all made stupid decisions. I think my first inclination was be like, this isn't real. How can you even believe this? But being judgmental about it did not work in my favor. I've made dumb decisions in the past too. We've all done things that were like, what was I thinking? Yeah. Kind of like an exaggerated example of that.
I mean, think about, you and I in high school dating someone that our parents hated and them telling me not to see them anymore did nothing but push me toward the worthless piece of what.
Yeah. And I think it's the same if you're being scammed. I mean, the roles are reversed. Maybe it's your child that's now acting like your parent. But when you're saying something like, you need to stop talking to this person, you need to stop doing this, they're going to have that same inclination. Like sometimes I felt like I was raising a rebellious teenager, because the more I told her not to do it, the more she wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. So I really had to change my tactics in order to get her to listen to me.
The one question I always get, I hate getting this question because I don't have an answer for it because it's just so different for everybody. But if someone says, how do I get my loved one to stop? What would you say?
I do think that I have some steps that can at least guide people toward maybe seeing maybe things don't add up. Like I've listened, to many stories, and people are like, I thought that sounded weird, but I just kept going with it. And so I think leading them to the solution instead of telling them, okay, are there any concerns you have? How do you know this is real? Like being more inquisitive and helping guide them to the solution themselves, I think is the best chance we have of getting them to stop.
I mean, it can't hurt.
And I mean, also maybe that's when you need to involve a third party. Maybe that's when you need to go see, like, I would be happy to meet with someone if they had that situation, but I mean, just for free, just to help, but maybe a neutral third party that isn't emotionally involved, who hasn't said this is fake, but could be like, okay, well, tell me why you think this is real. Like I'm a behavioral financial advisor, so I'm really interested in like the psychology and the behavior of things, but just helping like maybe a neutral third party looking at the situation and being like, okay, well, how did you meet them? How did this happen? What evidence do you have that this is real? And like maybe even helping them look for evidence. Like if it's a real person, you're going to be able to find information about them online, or you're going to find their profile on their company page or their bio on LinkedIn, or you know what I mean? Like they're going to have, a real person's going to have a trail. And that's something with the scammers, they give very like two first names that, or like really common names that are really hard to track down. But maybe someone else stepping in and saying, like, let's look at this objectively. I don't have a stake in this, whether it's real or whether it's not, but let's just do some research together and see what we can come up with. To me, that seems like the best chance of getting someone to see the truth.
It's so frustrating being the daughter of a romance scam victim. You become the bad guy for telling the truth, the one ruining their happiness, bursting their bubble, the one they stop trusting, all while you're just trying to protect them.
It can be so frustrating and it can be so isolating. And I mean, it can like really create relationship problems in your family. And that's what the scammers, the more isolated that person is, the better for them. But I would just encourage anyone who's in this situation not to give up and don't stop trying to help your loved one, because they're not going to appreciate your help. They're not going to want your help. But there are still things that you might be able to do to protect them that they may thank you for later.
So Jennifer found me to share her story, and I appreciate that more than she knows. These conversations aren't easy, especially when you're talking about someone you love. If you'd like to talk to Jennifer or connect with her about what your family is going through, just send me an email, scammerstoriespodcast@gmail.com, and I'll make sure I get you in touch with her. Until next time, Scammer Warriors.